Hello, amazing entrepreneur. It's Tash Corbin here, and welcome to another episode of the Heart-Centered Business Podcast. This is episode number 354, which means you can find all the relevant links and show notes for today's episode over at tashcorbin.com/354. In today's episode, I'm going to help you deal with those emails, direct messages, and comments from people who seem to always want to get free advice from you, and it's starting to make you feel a little bit resentful. How do you deal with people consistently asking for free advice? How do you prevent people from wanting to constantly pick your brain for free? And what strategies can you use to turn those people into highly qualified leads and potentially paying clients? I've got 10 really sexy tips for you, so let's dive on in. I'm Tash Corbin, and this is the Heart-Centered Business Podcast. Okay, so I'm just going to dive straight into this one because I don't think I need to tell you what this situation is because most of us have already experienced it, right? So people are DMing you, they are asking you for advice, they're asking you questions, and it's almost like they want you to deliver on your products and services for free just through those emails or DMs. So here is my hot take. I've got 10 tips for you. They might not be what you expect, but this is how I approach it, and it has helped me to turn this into a win, turn this into a business growth strategy, and ultimately it's helped me to be really clear on what are my boundaries, what am I willing to do for free, and throughout that whole process, it also informs a lot of my content as well. So, number one, these people who are sending you questions, asking for your advice, they are actually hot leads in your business. And there's a big difference in the way you respond, the way that it is received, the relationship that you create based simply on how you perceive them in the first place. So I do see a lot of people online in Facebook communities in particular complaining about people sending them questions in the DMs. Complaining about people sending them emails, asking them questions, complaining about people who expect to be helped for free. But that's actually informed a lot by your perception. Did the person message you and say, hey, can you please help me for free? I don't ever want to pay you money, but I have a question. Can you help me for free? No, they didn't. They never do it that way. They are asking you a question about an area where they perceive you to be an expert. And you don't know that they just want you to help them for free. You don't know that they're never going to buy from you. So it's important to check in with your mindset first and foremost, and what is the perception you are choosing to have of those people sliding into your direct messages. Now, I'm not saying that there aren't people who are just looking for free advice. They may have slid into your DMs already. I've had my share of people who just are wanting that free advice. Absolutely. But am I going to taint my perception of every single person who reaches out to me because of that one or two people who were trying to just milk me for as much of my expertise as they could? Or am I going to choose to perceive that every person asking me a question is there because they see me as an expert and they value my advice and they could potentially want to pay me for that advice? So number one is check your perception. And also, just as a little hot tip, it's not a good look on the internet if you're actually whinging about your audience online. Or being really judgmental of your audience online. There are people who I previously would have absolutely loved to work with, and I would have sent them a message and asked them a couple of questions, but I didn't because I saw them in Facebook's groups going, it's screenshotting questions, and they might have taken the person's details off, but screenshotting questions that people have sent them, and they've gone, oh my gosh, look at the audacity of this person thinking I'm going to give my time away for free. And I'm like, that person was asking you a pretty reasonable question. If you don't want to answer it for free, like, you're welcome to say, look, that's not something I would actually answer for free. But like, don't judge on them for seeing you as an expert and asking you a question. So that's number one. Check your perception and check the way that you talk about your audience and your clients online. That's a little bonus tip. Number two, as far as I'm concerned, building a one-to-one connection and relationship with someone who is clearly an ideal client because they're clearly interested in what I have to say and is clearly perceiving me as an expert, that's a really good use of my time. A really good use of my time. Yes, there's likely going to become a time where, for me, answering people's questions in the DMs is not going to be possible for everyone because my time is limited. But the number of people who've sent me a DM asking me a question that have turned into paying clients is significant enough for me to want to prioritize answering those questions. So, a lot of us perceive that it's a better use of our time to spend 10 minutes writing a post for social media that could potentially reach 1,000 people. We perceive that that's more valuable than spending 10 minutes responding to someone's question and qualifying whether they're actually a lead to work with you. The reason why we perceive the post on social media as more valuable is because of the potential audience, right? It could potentially reach 1,000 people. It could potentially reach 20,000 people, right? It's unlimited potential. And we perceive that the value of each audience member, whether they're in your DMs or whether they're seeing something on social media, is the same, but it's not the same. One warm, connected relationship is worth more than the potential of reaching 1,000 cold strangers on the internet for free. It absolutely is, because that person is like already knows you, likes you, and trusts you. That person is far closer to being ready to buy than some rando who's never heard of you on the internet before. And yet, we often perceive that investing time building one-to-one relationships with people is not a good use of our time. But as someone who has a Facebook community of 35,000 people, who has a mailing list in the 5 figures, who works mostly with people at scale, I still, to this day, see one-to-one relationship building and connection as a very valuable use of my time. And I don't just perceive it that way because I love people or I love my audience. I perceive it that way because the return on investment for that time in real dollars is always bigger. It's still bigger. I still get more return on investment from investing my time in one-to-one relationship building and connection than I do from any of those other broadcast strategies. And so until that changes, I will continue to prioritize that. So that is tip number 2. Number 3, see this as an opportunity to learn how to qualify people as leads. So this is an opportunity for you to practice asking really great questions. This is an opportunity for you to practice your qualifying skills. Are you good at qualifying leads? Or do you struggle to qualify because you haven't had enough practice? Someone sliding into your DMs or emails asking you a question about the very thing that you're an expert in is the perfect time for you to practice your qualifying skills. So see this as an opportunity to qualify rather than just being limited to having to answer someone's question for free and it potentially never leading anywhere. Seems simple to me, but a lot of people perceive this very differently. Okay, number 4, if you are feeling resentment or anger or frustration at the questions that people are asking you, and you feel worried about answering those questions because then if you answer them, they won't buy from you, I actually think that that's a big, juicy insight into a mindset block for you. And I want to explain this one for you because I believe, not even really knowing you or whether I know you or not, I believe that the products and services that you sell are far more valuable than just the answer to one question. Far more valuable. I want to really hit this home. That belief that if I answer someone's question for free, they won't buy from me is actually built on fear. That belief is built on fear. I'm afraid that if I answer someone's question, they won't buy from me. That's exactly what it is. We miss out the I'm afraid when we say it, but that's actually what it is. I'm afraid that if I answer someone's question for free, then they won't have a reason to buy from me. But if that person could get the result that they're looking for and move on and achieve their goals through just having one question answered, then they weren't your ideal client in the first place. Your ideal clients are people who need your support and help to facilitate a transformation. And the value proposition of whatever you sell is far more than just the answer to one question. This comes from that culture of believing and training people to believe that they are one sexy little secret answer away from having the life or the result of their dreams. But we know that that's not true. There's not one magical secret to growing a business that I am withholding from everyone on the internet unless they pay me. Every single strategy that I teach in my programs, I have shared for free on the internet. Every piece of advice that I have given people inside the Takeoff program, I have also shared for free on the internet in some way. The value of working with me in the Takeoff program is not all the little snippets of strategy, advice, or information that I have shared on the internet for free. The value of joining the Takeoff program is the transformation that occurs in you when you have a mentor and a step-by-step process to follow that takes you from where you are to making consistent sales online with a scalable marketing process. And I can't take you from there to there just by answering one question. If it was as simple as just answering one question, I don't think I'd have a valuable business model. So remind yourself that your products and services are far more valuable than one simple answer to one question. Really build up your belief in the value of what it is that you are selling, and actually you will never have that fear again of, well, if I tell them the answer to that question, they won't buy from me. That fear is not necessary, and that fear doesn't actually serve you in building your business. So let's let it go. And we let it go by recognizing and reminding ourselves that the value that we have to share is not just one sexy little secret. It's not just one answer to a question. The value that we have to share is a deep and powerful transformation. And that is far more than you could jam into the answer to a question. Okay. Number 5, use this as an opportunity to craft your own words on how you respond to those inquiries, to those questions. So for some people, they don't want to answer any questions in the DMs or the emails. I love answering people's questions in the DMs and emails. I love answering people's questions. Like, I literally have a page on my website, tashcorbin.com/question, where I encourage people to submit questions in for the podcast. And I often on this podcast will say, oh, if you've got any questions about that, like, just send me a DM on Instagram. And when people DM me on Instagram with their questions, I answer their questions. So, but I also have my words, right? I have my way of answering it in a boundaried way, of answering it without necessarily telling that person, oh, I'll just keep doing this all day for you for free. So look at this as an opportunity to craft your words. I don't think that there are any magical words that I can give you that will work for every single person who listens to this podcast. I can help you craft your words, right? I can help you with some prompts and some things to think about, but see this as an opportunity to practice. I wonder if I said it this way, would that have the person recognize that that's a product that I could sell them? And that this is the last question that I'll answer for them for free. Or can I create some structure around the way that I answer questions that encourages people to then go and look at how we could continue working together? So number 5 is use this as an opportunity, craft your own words. Number 6, start your answer with setting the tone of how this goes. So actually on my website, if you go and submit a question on my contact form, right? If you go and submit a contact form on my website, right at the start, before you fill in the form, it says, whilst I do not provide free coaching by email, if you have a question about blah, 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 right? So I'm already setting the tone there, right? I'm saying I don't do free coaching on email, but here's a space where you can ask me questions. If you've got a question about product, if you've got a question about tech stuff, if you've got a question about something that I've shared, like you're more than welcome to fill this in. But I've made it clear from the start, I don't do free coaching on email. So I'm just setting that expectation nice and early. So sometimes also if people will send me a question and it's not something that I would want them to be like continuously asking me questions about, I'll start by saying, hi, thank you so much for sending this through. Look, I don't normally answer questions like this one-to-one. This would be something that would be answered inside my takeoff program or in a one-to-one mentoring session. But here's blah, 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 right? So by the start of the way that I answer the question, I'm sort of just reestablishing that boundary. And I find that that stops the, okay, now help me with this. Okay, now help me with this. Okay, now help me with this, right? Because ultimately, I don't have a problem with people asking me a question here or there. The thing that I want to have a boundary around is that I don't want to be spending my time coaching people and basically being their business mentor for free in their DMs at the cost of me coaching and mentoring my paying clients. And so, like, I'm happy to help people and I'm happy to answer their questions, but I can set the tone by the way that I commence, the way I answer the first question that pops in. And so by being proactive about it with the way that I answer the first question, I'm preventing subsequent, can you coach me for free type questions from coming in, rather than waiting for them to ask another question and then having to go, well, I'm not answering that because I don't coach people for free. That feels yucky, right? Like that feels for me. I don't like saying to people, I don't answer that for free. Like I don't like saying that. And so I prevent having to say that in response to a question by answering the first question with setting the tone at the start. So hopefully that helps. Number 7, your boundaries are your responsibility. So I say this to my students, I say this to my clients all the time, because I want them to be assured that it's not their job to know exactly where the line is. That's my job. And so in my programs, I have a module at the start of all of my programs called Boundaries. And in it, it says, my boundaries are my responsibility. And here's some loose rules, right? Here's some guidelines around where the boundaries are. This is a group mentoring program, so questions are answered in the group. Don't send me DM questions about this group mentoring program. It needs to be at the benefit of the group, right? Even if you feel like it's the most selfish question, like, Tash, can you tell me how to say blah, blah, blah? There's going to be some value in me answering that publicly for the group. And so things are answered in the group. But then I also say, my boundaries are my responsibility. So if you're unsure, give it a crack, be the squeaky wheel, ask the question, and I'll forgive you for crossing a boundary if you forgive me for telling you where it is. Because I would rather people nudge up against my boundaries and get the most value out of working with me, rather than sit back in fear, wondering and worrying whether they're allowed to ask that question or not, but never being able to ask the question and being stuck. I don't want people to be stuck. Now, I've got a really good example of this. Inside the Takeoff program a little while ago, someone asked a question. They said, I'm not sure if I'm allowed to ask this question here, but I'm going through the Takeoff program and I see that you suggest this model of strategy, and I also follow this other person and they have this model of strategy, and I'm just wondering, why is it that you recommend it that way over this way? And if I was to do it her way, would I still be able to get your help and support with that, right? Really good question. And I was like, don't ever apologize for asking a question like that. I am 100% happy to address ideas or strategies or things you see out there on the internet, because I see myself as a shiny object blocker for a lot of people. But sometimes there are things that you find out on the internet and they are a good idea. So I'd rather you come and ask me rather than like half doing that strategy and half doing the strategy that we had agreed on for you as well. And so I answered very fully, like, here's why I don't recommend that. But if you were to do it that way, this is what I would be doing. And here's how we make sure that it's going to still move you towards getting high profitability very quickly. And there were about 7 people who commented, oh my gosh, thank you so much for asking this question. I realized this has kind of been floating around in my brain for a little while as well, but I didn't feel like hadn't quite formed the right question. I couldn't articulate why I felt like it might be a good move for me. And so, like, that is absolutely brilliant and beautiful. I'd rather the person ask the question than to not ask the question in the first place. So when we view the world through this lens of, look, my boundaries are my responsibility, I can give people guidelines about where those boundaries lie, but I don't resent anyone for crossing a boundary accidentally if it, like, they were unsure whether that was something that was allowed or not, right? I don't ever resent someone for accidentally crossing a boundary. If someone continuously crosses that boundary, even after I've reinforced it, then I'm going to take more assertive action on reinforcing that boundary. But ultimately, I think if we just approach it as though my boundaries are my responsibility, I'm allowed to, people are allowed to test those boundaries and ask questions if they're unsure, and I'm allowed to let them know where the boundary stands, and we're all going to be okay with that. It's just it makes me breathe a sigh of relief. And actually, a lot of people, when they first join the Takeoff program and they watch that boundaries module, they come straight into the group and say, oh my goodness, thank you so much for that boundaries module, because I was so unsure about what to do and whether I was going to be like what I was allowed to ask and what I wasn't allowed to ask. And I just feel this sense of relief that it's really clear, and I know I'm not going to get in trouble if I accidentally trip over a boundary. And so it's a really beautiful gift that you can give your audience, that you take responsibility for your boundaries, but you also know how to reinforce them without getting all resentful and upset at someone when it might have been an accident. Number 8, you don't have to answer the question just for that one person. You could take that as an opportunity to answer it for everyone. So, and you can do it in both ways. So sometimes if someone asks me a question in the DMs and I think, oh, that's actually a great question, a lot of people are going to be wanting to ask me that question, I'll say to the person, oh, that is such a great question. What I'm going to do is I'm going to do a Facebook Live to answer it in about 20 minutes because I think everyone will be able to benefit from this. And if you've got any follow-up questions, you can ask them on that live, right? So it's a way of actually taking a question and turning it into a brilliant content piece. Or you can do both, where you say, oh, that is such a good question. Here's my initial thoughts, 1, 2, and 3. And I'm going to make a podcast about that because that was really amazing. So make sure that you're on my mailing list and that you can keep an eye out for that podcast episode. So see how, like, that question, rather than being a source of frustration or resentment, now becomes a source of content ideas. And it just shifted because of a perception shift. It just shifted because you had a strategy of what you're going to do when those types of questions pop in. So one of the things that I do though is whenever I choose to broadcast the answer, right, use the answer as a broadcast, is that I don't let that one-to-one relationship die just because I've taken it to a broadcast relationship. Right? So rather than just go, I'm going to answer it on a Facebook Live and then never reaching back out to them again, I'll say, I'm going to do it as a Facebook Live. If you've got any follow-ups, ask them over on the live. And then when I've done the Facebook Live, I close the loop and I say, hey, I'm not sure if you were able to catch it live, but here's the link to the Facebook Live that I did answering your question. If you need anything else, let me know, right? And then I go into my qualifying. What else is getting in your way, or what's next for you from here? Do you want me to tell you how I could support you from here, right? So that person is still a hot lead, and it's helped me to create some really valuable content for my audience. Like, it's so win-win-win-win-win when you view it through that lens. All right. Number 9 piece of advice. Now, this is probably more prevention than cure, is do you make it really clear and obvious that you are a business, that you charge for services that could have solved that problem for the person. Now, this one is has become more and more required in the age of content-driven business models. So a content-driven business model might be having a free blog or being an influencer, right? There are so many influencers and bloggers and people out there at the moment who they make their money from partners and brand sponsorships and advertising dollars and that kind of thing, that it's not obvious that you actually have a service. It's not obvious that you sell mentoring sessions or coaching, or that you sell a service that actually helps in this space. We need to make sure that we make it obvious that this is a business, that you're not just getting your funding from partners and sponsorship and advertising, that you actually have a service that delivers on this outcome, and that's why you've created this content. And so, this has happened to me, right? Where I have followed someone on Instagram and I assumed that they were an influencer model just because of the way that they talked about what they did. And I saw that they had brand partnerships, and they had never once talked about their coaching, their offers, the things that they sold. And so I didn't realize that they actually offered services in this space. And so I sent them a DM and asked them a question, but I asked them a question thinking that they could do it as an Ask Me Anything answer, or that would be good content for them. And like that I was just building a relationship with them as someone in their audience. I wasn't depending on them answering my question. I just like threw it out there as, oh, hey, by the way, blah, blah, blah. And I asked the question, and they replied to me like, I don't answer questions like this unless you're paying for your sessions. And I was like, oh, wait, you sell sessions? But the way that they shut me down, and they did it like really aggressively, like they didn't just say that, they said some other things. I was like, well, I don't want to work with them, like, because they're making me feel stupid for not knowing that they sold sessions. But I'd followed them for months and had never heard about these sessions. I'd never visited their website. I thought they were an influencer. I didn't even know they had a website, right? And so it's your job to ensure that you're at least making it obvious that there is actually a paid option for people to have that question answered. Because if I had known, I would have just booked a session with the person. Because I did have a bunch of things that I would be able to ask them if I'd booked a session with them. But I didn't know. And so, go back and have a look at your social media content. Go and have a look at your website. I have been to people's websites before, and I haven't known how I could pay them money. And because I couldn't find a way that I could pay them money, I assumed they were getting their money from something else. So it's not our job to magically mind read that you have paid offers in this area. It's not our job to stalk your entire website, ensure that we're on your mailing list, read every single post that you do on social media to stay informed about your business model. It is your job to consistently tell your audience about your offers and the ways that they can buy from you to access the answers to their questions. So, and if someone still asks you a question, then my final tip for you is assume the best of them. Assume the best of them. So if someone sends me a question and I think, well, obviously that's the takeoff program, I don't say, well, obviously that's the takeoff program. I assume, oh, they mustn't know about the takeoff program. And see how just that tiny little switch in my assumptions makes a significant difference to the way that I engage with that person and interact with that person, but also the energy that I put out into the world as well. It makes a significant difference to whether people feel it's safe to send me a question or not. And I want every single person in my audience to feel like they can reach out to me one-to-one. And a lot of people, like, I have to reassure them of that over and over again because they have been shut down so much by other people who do similar things to me. I mean, I love the 4-Hour Workweek and Timothy Ferriss, but to be honest with you, I think he has done a lot of damage to that, like, whole I only answer emails on Mondays between 12 and 1. That's like the email signature reply, auto reply that he suggests that you set up for your emails. I think any auto reply on a business email that says, I will get to you when I get to you, which is basically what it says, is damaging for the connection you create with your audience. And so, I think they have a lot to answer for, those mentors and business strategists and that, who are so focused on staying disconnected from their audience that it's actually reducing and limiting the level of connection and conversion that they can achieve. Now, I can understand, like, the reason why Tim Ferriss was talking about it, he was selling supplements, right? So his business email inbox, like, he was selling health supplements, well-being supplements, something, right? Like that. So you're not going to be on your email every day answering questions from people about your supplements, to get that sale of that $29.99 product. Yes? And yes, that you might have a customer service person who does it for you, or you might have other ways that you proactively address those questions. But for us and our model of business, for most people, the value of someone buying us from them, the conversion event that they buy, is a $1,000 product, or it's a $2,000 package, or it's a $10,000 package. Like, stop keeping those people at an arm's length. Stop keeping them at a distance from you. Assume the best of your audience rather than assuming the worst. If I don't have an autoresponder that tells people, just wait, I'll get to you when I get to you, then they might send me a follow-up email within an hour and keep peppering me with questions, right? Yes, there are people who do that, but those people, in my experience, are the exception. They're not the rule. And actually, whenever I send my newsletter out, so, I have 5 figures of people on my newsletter, on my mailing list. Whenever I send my newsletter out, I get a bunch of autoresponders, right? I get people's auto replies. They come into our customer service help desk as a reply to the newsletter. And to be honest with you, most of them that I read, I actually think they're a turnoff. They are a huge turnoff. And a lot of the time, the person who, the autoresponder I've received, I know that they're going to check their email that day. I know that they could, if I was genuinely sending them a, hey, how do I book in with you, that they would be on it. They would reply within an hour, right? Absolutely. And yet they're sending an auto response out to the world that says, I don't have time for you. I don't have time for this. I don't value this request, and I will get to you when I get to you. And even when it's written in the most friendly way, when it's written in the most loving way, we aim to get back to you within 24 to 48 hours, it still, to me, comes across as keeping people at an arm's length. And I just want you, you're welcome to do that if that's something that you consciously want to do. But I just welcome you to just reflect on that. Is that actually the perception I want to be giving off for people? Is that the way I want people to feel in relation to the connection they could have with me and my business? Or am I doing that out of fear that in 3 years' time, when I have 100,000 people on my mailing list, I'm going to be too busy to answer their emails? At this point in time in your business, if you're anything like me or earlier in your journey than me, I would argue that having people slide into your DMs, having people slide into your inbox, having people comment on your posts and ask follow-up questions is actually something that you would be better off encouraging, because it would create more connection and you would actually get more clients out of it. And it's a really good use of your time, and it's a really good relationship to establish with your clients and with your audience. So, as I said, this is probably not the answers that you were expecting from me in relation to dealing with those emails and DMs and comments from people wanting free advice from you. But it is truly how I feel, and I actually think it's the most helpful answer for most people who are listeners to my podcast. So thank you so much for joining me for this episode of the Heart Centered Business Podcast. And just a quick reminder, with the show notes of today's episode, 354, tashcorbin.com/354, I'll put the link to come and ask me a question. Because I actually want you to ask me a question. I love when you slide into my DMs and ask questions. I love when you send me questions for ideas for things for the podcast. Not just because you might potentially buy from me one day, but because I value that connection that we have, even if you never buy something from me. I value the insight it gives me as to what people are looking for help with at the moment, regardless of whether you buy from me ever or not. And I also know that for a lot of people, the reason that they're asking that question is because they want to achieve something that if they joined my program, I could help them achieve it. And I act in good faith that people really do want to be part of my audience and learn from me, and that maybe one day being in one of my programs is going to be the right fit for them. And by developing that relationship, by having that connection with you, I hope that it continues to build your trust that I am a deeply caring mentor who has your best interests at heart and really wants to help you to succeed, because I know that a rising tide lifts all ships, and I am deeply invested in the success of my clients and the success of my audience. I want us all to have more money, to have more economic power, to have more wealth, because I know regardless of whether I get part of that wealth or not, it's going to make the world a better place. And so I know when I have this conversation with most of my followers, with most of my clients, that's how they feel as well. But they've been led to believe that having a distance-based, fear-based approach to freebie people chasers, to people who time wasters who are asking them all these free questions, is the stronger position to put themselves in. And actually, I don't believe it. And when we unpack where it's come from, most of my audience don't believe that either. So thank you so much for joining me for this episode. Until next time, I cannot wait to see you shine. Bye for now. Would you like more tips, tools, and resources to help you grow your heart-centered business? Head to tashcorbin.com today.